Hello. Hey, that was a fun game. That was one of those games where everything went the way it should have gone. That was pretty wild. First period, I was like taken aback almost by how great everything was going because really they played pretty good in the first period, but not great, not 3-0 great. Second period, they were fantastic. And that was real nice to see kind of the expectation of the first period ends. It's 3-0. They're not really dominating. And you would expect Toronto, maybe good team, going to push back a little bit. Didn't happen because the Golden Knights came right out and scored again. So that was certainly a good thing to see. And just like the bounces, you look at the Sod block, and the only guy in the building who knows where it is Sod. And then I don't no idea what McCabe was doing defensively there. And then even then, the puck bounces out and goes right to Hurdle. The little backhand shot is saved by 99 out of 100 goalies, if not more. And that one ended up slipping through. You get the Eichel shot, which, by the way, the Brandon picture on that, if you haven't seen that on our Twitter yet, I'll probably put it up at some point. It'll be a story on the site at some point. We'll use that picture. I don't know when, but it is awesome to see the flex on his stick. By the way, that's why I'm at home, because when Brandon goes to the game, I stay at home. That's the way the rules work for me. So that's why I'm here and not at the game. So I was with you watching on TNT today, which was good. I thought they were good. I thought maybe a little bit too much. The Golden Knights are going to get Rantanen. Like, I still can't figure out how that even makes any sense to anyone other than the idea of like, well, they always do something. Well, okay, but you still have to make a deal that actually makes sense. And I still can't come up with one. We were talking about it in the Discord. I can't come up with any possible way that the team gets better and gets Rantanen. It just doesn't compute to me. Like, they actually can re-sign him. So in that respect, like, it does sort of make sense in that they could potentially have him going forward. But like, it costs Theodore Dorofeev and Korczak. Like, how is that making the team better? Like, you have to beat Natchez, Drury, and a pick. Like, that's highly unlikely that that's what's going to happen. Yeah, and like Marchand just got injured. So maybe they end up going down that road. I don't know, but he's out week to week, potentially the rest of the season. Like, I guess the Oilers just did that with Trent Frederick, but is that the answer? I don't know. I still, the more I've looked at it, the more I've kind of tried to look at all of the picture and try to take it all in. And today's game is part of it. Is they're now winning. They've played great out of the break here. They've won 5 out of 6, 3 in a row at home on this trip. Going into the deadline, they're in a position where they're going to feel pretty good about themselves. And I think that when you look back to the years where they went into the break or into the deadline playing well, typically, and I wrote this story not too long ago, typically those are the years that there's less action that occurs right around the deadline. That's not to say that that's a guarantee or anything of that. I'm just utilizing that as something that has occurred. We have 7 deadlines in our past, and that has been a little bit of the identity of what has occurred. That's I still think doing nothing is unlikely. It just seems to me that when you look at the lineup and you consider what potentially may occur or what it may look like moving forward, I think it's hard to believe that you're not going to want to supplement this team in some way. And I do think they have some assets that, there are some second round picks, third round picks that potentially aren't all that necessary to keep around moving forward as you're in a win now window. So that's where we're at with that. I do think you're looking at like a depth forward that's better than Raphael Lavoie, Cole Schwint, Tanner Pearson, Brandon Saad. Like, that's the level we're trying to get. Maybe if you can potentially find someone better than Nick Waugh, that would be nice. That's kind of where it looks like to me. I do think that this game, though, is significant in the fact that it's another example of what we've seen a little bit more since before the break. And the 2 games against New Jersey, those are playoff teams. This is a Toronto game that's a playoff team. There's some other ones in there that I thought they played pretty well in the Boston game. I thought they played pretty well in at least one of the New York games. Like, there are enough in there. Granted, not a lot against the division, and the one division game ended up going the wrong way, so that has to be taken into consideration. But that's kind of backwards, of course, of what the entire regular season has been. But I would say that having the feeling of this team can do it, this team has the ability to get it done. When you set out on the beginning of the season thinking we don't have a lot of assets to make big moves at this deadline, the hope is the team will be good enough come deadline time that you don't have to do anything all that significant. And I think that's probably where we are. I think there's an argument to be made that they can score enough, and they did again today. They did it against Chicago. The scoring number as a team as a whole is pretty darn good. Power play has been way better, which kind of lessens the importance of 5-on-5 goals. There is an argument that even though you look down the list and you ask some questions about are these wingers going to be good enough to score enough goals come playoff time against great teams and great goalies, there has been enough there that I think you can feel fairly comfortable. Also, they're winning these games without William Karlsson, without Shea Theodore. And both of those guys are expected to be back in the lineup. Karlsson potentially as soon as like next week or maybe a little bit beyond that. Theodore, as far as I've been told, is before the regular season ends. So that one's maybe still, what, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks away at worst. But I think he does get back in there before the season ends. So this game is another example of an opportunity where you get out there, you beat a good team, you beat a good goalie, or at least a good goalie based statistically. He was terrible in this game. Nonetheless, they did beat him, and he has been very good this season. So you can take that. I'm not overly enthralled enough by the first period to be that excited about it. I'm certainly not overly enthralled enough by the Chicago game. I was pretty happy with both New Jersey games, and I think that's a good example of like that's what this team can be near or at its best. That a team like Jersey, who can score, who can do things offensively, who has been a playoff team basically the entire season, was healthy in this second game at least until the end. To be able to just shut them down, really not allow much offensive firepower from them. And then the goaltending has been good behind it when Adin Hill's been in there. And so that is another example of like, okay, we're going to be a good defensive team. We have good defensive players, even with Theodore out, and he is going to come back. That there's more indication that says they don't have to go all that crazy at this deadline. And I think everything continues to add up, and we will see. Crazy shit happens at deadlines, but I think the strongest scenario here is nothing or the ninth best forward on the team. Like, I think that's what we're looking at. And you're talking maybe a third round pick if it gets crazy and they get the seventh best forward on the team. Maybe it's a second round pick. I don't think they can even get up towards near the top third, fourth, fifth best forward in the team. That costs a lot more. I don't even think that's going to happen. And, everyone's going to keep yapping about secondary goalies. It's stupid. That is stupid. It's a terrible idea. They should not buy a second goalie. It's dumb. They absolutely not. Ilya Samsonov has to play 5, 6, 7 games the rest of the season. If they lose every single one of those games, it's not really going to matter. They're still going to have to beat LA, Edmonton, Colorado, Winnipeg, Dallas, some combination of those three. And the way that it's looking, there's highly unlikely that they get all the way up into Minnesota's another one, that they get all the way up into that first place spot. If there was a chance to get to the first place spot, in which you look at the 8th place spot in the Western Conference, maybe you can sit there and say that potentially could be worth it, because that may be worth a free round in the playoffs, because all of those teams are complete shit. Like all of them. Vancouver, Utah, Anaheim, Calgary, all of them. There are other ones in the mix. They're all crap. All of them are terrible. So it would be nice to play one of those. But they're still like 8 points or 6, enough behind Winnipeg that's unlikely. I don't think that that's terribly likely. And Dallas is in the way as well. So they have to get above them as well. I just don't see that happening. So buying a backup goalie to play 5 or 6 games during the rest of this season and then sit on the bench the entirety of the postseason doesn't make a lot of sense. Doesn't make any sense. And if you do this, which everyone wants to talk about this, by the way, John Gibson got hurt today. So even more reason not to trade for John Gibson. John Gibson also has a contract into the future. Even more reason not to trade for John Gibson. But if you bring in John Gibson, and if he comes in here and plays 4 games down the stretch and is good, say he has similar numbers to what Aiden Hill has had over the last couple of weeks, then he might be the starter. And now you've completely changed your team. You've completely caused all of this madness to occur. It makes no sense. If Aiden Hill gets hurt in the playoffs, the Golden Knights are screwed. Whether they buy a goalie or whether they don't buy a goalie, they are screwed. It's not going to go well. If that's what you're doing, then okay, well then we need to buy another Jack Eichel. We need to buy another Alex Pietrangelo. If we're doing insurance policies for potential players getting injured, then you're screwed anyway. So I don't understand that line of thinking because it doesn't make any sense. You can't guard against every single injury. If Jack Eichel gets hurt, the Golden Knights are in bad shape. If Mark Stone or Alex Pietrangelo, Noah Hannafin, Tomas Hertl, you name it. Like if any of them go out, they're going to have a hard time getting all the way through. Aiden Hill's one of them. Aiden Hill's one of them. So if you decide to buy another goalie, you're inviting more problems than that insurance policy pays for. I've been over this multiple times. If you're not on my side, you're wrong. And if the Golden Knights do this, then they're wrong and they're going to make a terrible decision. And they've done it in the past and they will make it. If they make it again, I will call it out again and it will be terrible. It was what, 2020? They bought Robin Lehner, and it was a terrible idea. I don't think they have the assets to get Alex Tuch. I don't know how that would even work. Plus, I don't think that they're going to want to do that. Braden Shen, maybe. They've been talking, everything said you have to have a first round pick to get Braden Shen. So I don't see that happening. This is a terrible idea as well. Just bring up Lindbaum. No. He's way too young, not ready for this situation at all. If you think Ilya Samsonov is having a hard time, imagine what Carl Lindbaum's going to have coming into this situation. It's just not going to be good. Like, this is a guy, Samsonov, who played playoff games last year and was pretty good in them for the team the Golden Knights just played. Like, he's not that bad. Yes, it's not been good recently. He can be good enough. He can be as good as Aiden Hill at his best. It is possible. It's not necessary to A, spend the assets, and B, create the problems. Because every single game the rest of the season, you're going to be like, oh, I don't know, maybe they should have played the other goalie. And it's just going to create dissent and problems, and we don't need any of that. This Periscope and all Periscopes are brought to you by the Jimmerson Law Firm. Jimmerson Law Firm is now I can't even do the read. Jimmerson Law Firm is one of Las Vegas's preeminent law firms specializing in high-stakes business, civil, and family litigation. When winning matters, seek out the Jimmerson Law Firm. Yeah, okay, like a Brandon Tanev, sure. I know we keep going over the same names, and I've been doing this on a couple of different shows over the last couple of weeks here. I just like the actual name of the player probably isn't really going to matter. It's going to be more about how it fits, how much they give up to get it, where that player slots into the lineup, and then how he plays in the time where he's here. Like, Braden Shen could be good. Braden Shen could be terrible. Tanev could be great. Tanev could be terrible. Joel Armia could be great. Could be terrible. Like, every single one of these guys, it can go any of the different ways. I do think it's worthwhile, especially now Lavoie got hurt in this game. Not that I haven't been as sold as Lavoie as most people have. I see some skill level there. I see some usefulness there, but to me, like, it's no better than Cole Schwindt. It's no different really than Cole Schwindt, and Cole Schwindt plays center. So there's a little bit more benefit there. I don't think it's all that different than Jonas Rönnbjerg. I don't think it's all that different even than Brisson. There are just different aspects that some of them bring. Like, Lavoie's a little bit better at holding on to the puck. Lavoie's a little bit better on the forecheck than like Brisson would be. But I think Rönnbjerg's better than both of them on the forecheck. I think Schwindt is the most consistent and the most defensively reliable and has the strongest stick. I do think when you look at the team, though, it's beneficial to have another player in the mix. Like, you go back to the Teddy Bluger move 2 years ago, And you say, okay, well, was that necessary? No, because they didn't have any injuries. But if there were to have been an injury to a Nick Waugh, an Ivan Barbashev, somebody else not a massively significant piece in the 2023 season, he could have stepped in, played on the penalty kill, been a fourth line player, moved someone else up, and they would have been just fine. Like, that's the type of piece you're kind of looking for. Would it be nice if that piece is in the lineup all the time? Yes. Does it absolutely have to be? No. Just like having Brandon Saad. Has Brandon Saad been awesome? To me, not really. He's been fine. He's been better than some of the other guys that have been in the lineup, and certainly it has been better than some of the AHL guys that would have been there. And I'm happy that he's on the roster and is part of the depth and is part of the group that is going to help this team in the playoffs. But I don't think that he's the type of player that's going to change what's going to happen. I also don't think that whoever they acquire at the deadline is going to materially change what's going to happen. It's going to come down to how well do the best players play. If you get a game like today out of Eichel, when Eichel plays like this team's very hard to beat. He hasn't been for the last couple of games, and they've been winning despite it, which is nice. But to know that that's still there and that can potentially come out against a very good team with a good offense or good defensive group, and pretty good defensive centers, at least how they've been playing this season. That's what's going to matter. That's what is going to make the difference. What does Mark Stone look like in the playoffs? Can Tomas Hertl continue playing as well as he's been playing? Can you get this Barbashev, Howden, Kolazar line to dominate teams as they have in the last couple of games, or like two of the last three here, two of the last four, maybe I would say. They've been really good. If that can be a consistent line, then you don't need to go out and make the big change, because that the other part about making that deadline deal, and when people talk about making the bigger deadline deal, it has trickle down effects to the lineup. And there have been issues across the course of this season where they haven't quite been able to find the perfect home for every different player. Sometimes guys move up into situations and they do well. Other times guys move down or move around or left or right and whatever. And sometimes they aren't. We've seen long stretches where they haven't gotten much out of Pearson. We're currently seeing one out of Olofsson. We saw it out of Howden. We saw it out of Kolazar. We saw it out of Barbashev. We saw it out of Hertl to begin the year. Like, to make another move and throw somebody else in there, I think it needs to be an ancillary piece as opposed to a majorly important piece, because the way that this team's playing at the moment, they're starting to find ways. As you put Carlson back in the lineup, as you put Theodore back in the lineup, I think they will be fine. I think they have a good chance to beat any team in the Western Conference. I'm not sure that they're going to beat three teams in a row in the Western Conference. I'm getting closer to that because you're starting to see the defense start to come around. In this particular game, Aiden Hill was able to erase some of the problems that the defense was having. That's what you want. You want that relationship between the D and the goalie. And they've had that in the playoffs over the past couple of seasons. Certainly the year they won the cup, there was that in the Dallas series. They just didn't score. And that's where power play will hopefully come in and make a little bit of a difference as well. Bruce Cusick, the PA announcer, I believe there was a tweet that said he is ill. So I'm hoping that he's better. He was there at the last game. I chatted with him after the game. He seemed fine after that game, was not there today. Hopefully he is back moving forward. I hope that there's nothing too bad going on with that. What's wrong with Nick Waugh? His play has dropped off. Yeah, it just seems like they can't quite find the right combination of players. And I do think that Nick Waugh is the type of player that's heavily reliant on what's around him. It doesn't necessarily, like, his game doesn't change all that much. He's going to play kind of the same style of game. But when he plays with wingers that are able to score, and that's usually when he's at his best, is when he's playing center. When he has wingers that are able to score, he's able to get in front of the goal and he can do some good things, and his hands show up and he scores and he gets offensive opportunities, and that's what happens. When he plays with guys like Olofsson, who's been in a bit of the slump recently, Lavoie, Schwint, Pearson at times, Kolazar when he's on that line, and there's not a ton of offensive pop with them, you kind of end up forgetting that he's even really out there all that much, and it kind of falls into this get the puck in deep, try to do something, try to hold it in there deep as long as you possibly can, and then get off and hand it off to Eichel or Stone or whoever else in a better situation. That's basically what they're getting out of Wah. That's where, okay, if you can find a player who does have a little bit of offensive pop at this deadline, and he does have the perfect fit and connection with Nick Wah, which is impossible to guess, but you can only throw somebody in and hope. If that were to occur, then maybe the team does get quite a bit better, because I don't think Nick Wah's like having a terrible year. I just think he's in a situation where the team's wingers aren't at the level that they had been in the past, and therefore that's where you're seeing some of the drop off. I don't think he's an excellent defensive player. I don't think he's bad, but I don't think he's an excellent defensive player. So therefore, sometimes you will see, well, bad situations, bad scenarios, road games more so than home games where they're ending up in bad spots where they don't have last change. And that's where you get some of that. Does Hannafin have a Shea Theodore problem? I would say no to that. I think that Hannafin's mostly doing what he's doing on the power play. Like a lot of what the offense is coming from is on the power play. So I guess like if you want Hannafin to be getting all the points and Shea doesn't get any of the points, and that's what makes Hannafin a good player, like that's fine. I don't think that's necessarily makes any difference for the team. I think that when you look at kind of what the shortcomings have been with Hannafin, I don't think they've necessarily disappeared over the course of the last 4 games here. I think you're getting a little bit more confidence in his offense, and he's jumping in the play a little bit more, and that may be good for the now. I don't know that that's going to be good for the long term. I don't see the massive change in Hannafin's game that everyone else seems to be seeing just because he has all these points. Like, that's kind of how I'm viewing it. I don't know. Wah to wing when Bill comes back. So I don't think that that's the right move. I think Howden going back to wing is the right play. Now, Cassidy was talking about this a little bit yesterday, I think it was. Maybe it was the day before. It was a recent question, which is basically talking about the versatility that Howden offers and how it affects his scoring. Because the beginning of the season, he was scoring a bunch of goals. Recently, up until today, which he scored a goal, which probably wouldn't have been a goal most of the time, but it was today. If you end up having him as center, he tends to be more of a facilitator, isn't crashing the goal as often, not getting those types of goals as often as when he plays wing. I think you're getting a decent player either way. I think he's doing a good job no matter which position he's playing in, and I don't think there's as much of a drop off as what we've seen when Wah goes to wing. When Wah goes to wing, typically there actually is a significant drop off. Defensively, it's not as good. Offensively, it's not as consistent. I think the forecheck slows down a little bit. It's not usually as good. So to me, leaving him there was also some suggestion on the radio of potentially playing Carlson on the wing. That's stupid. That's a terrible idea. Not even sure why that would even be brought up. William Karlsson's the best defensive center the team has ever had, and that's with Jack Eichel nearly winning a Selke. And he legitimately might have a chance to win a Selke this year, and still William Karlsson's a better, more consistent defensive center. It just the Selke has to do with points for some reason. I don't know. I don't understand any of that. Nonetheless, not using William Karlsson as a center, I'd rather trade him. If you're going to move William Karlsson to the wing, trade him and get somebody else. Like if that's how you want to get Mikko Rantanen, fine. If that's how you want to get Brad Marchand, okay. I also think that would be dumb. Nonetheless, that's at least a better option than moving him to the wing. Makes no sense to me at all. Not even sure that it should even be. If it's put on the board, immediately scratch it off with whatever you have around there. Aren't the Oilers the Cup favorites? Yeah, I mean, maybe by betting lines, and I think that's based solely on how much money goes into it. I don't think that the advanced analytics or any of the computer models, or at least any of the ones that are correct in regards to actually care about defending, would say that they are. I think the best team in the league this season, at least in the regular season, has been Washington and Winnipeg. So if we're going based solely on that, those are the two teams that are the most right there. Beyond them, it's probably Vegas, Dallas. Is probably it. Like maybe Tampa now. If you want to get with what they've done today and then what they've been doing recently, maybe you can put them. I think the Golden Knights are right in there. Now, when you start to look at how does it look in the playoffs, what does it look like against each different matchup? I think that's where, okay, maybe you can say I'll advance the Oilers a little bit further because I think that those two players are going to be able to beat anybody. There's some sort of belief in Stuart Skinner that I still do not understand, that continues to be out there. I don't get it, but it's still out there. I don't think he's any good at all. I think he's the reason they didn't win the Stanley Cup last year. I think he might be the reason they don't win the Stanley Cup again. So I don't find the Oilers to be a Stanley Cup favorite. I don't think they're better than Dallas. I don't think they're better than Winnipeg. I think Vegas potentially beats them in a series. I think it's close. Like the matchup with LA is the one that I'm a little more concerned about. We'll see what happens. I think a lot can change between now and then. We will see. Yeah, and if the season ended today, they still would be getting Colorado in the first round. Don't love that. I like the idea of the travel there. That sounds like fun for me. I would love to go to Colorado. We haven't had a chance to do that because the time that they went there was during COVID, or at least some sort of, yeah, it was full. Was it full on? No, it was like the 21 season, but it was like half COVID, where there were some fans, but we couldn't go in the locker room. So what was the point? Nonetheless, don't love that matchup. There's not really a great one. Like Minnesota, if banged up, okay, that's a pretty good one. Like if you tell me they're not getting Kaprizov back, all right, I'll take Minnesota. But other than that, like it's going to be a battle. No matter who they're playing, it's going to be a battle. The Golden Knights are not going to be massive favorites in the first round, even if they dominate the rest of the season. It's just not going to go that way because that's what's going. That's how it's going to go. Unless they were to take that first pick away, or first spot away. Then, if it's Vancouver, Calgary, whatever, I talked about that earlier. That's it. So, moving forward, what's going to happen? So, if there's a trade tomorrow, we'll do a Periscope tomorrow after the trade, or at least sometime close to after the trade. If there is not, the deadline is Friday at noon. So, there's also a game that night. There also potentially is a morning skate that night. So I don't know exactly how that all is going to go. We'll see how the timing of all that works. Typically on deadline day, practice or not, there's a press conference like a couple hours afterwards, after the deadline's completely over. McCrimmon talks about the deadline. Then usually I would end up coming back, doing a Periscope at that point. Because we have a game that night, it might change. It might end up being after the game. Maybe I'll do it before the game. Maybe we'll do Twitter space on the way in. I don't know. But there will certainly be something after the deadline to talk about what the Golden Knights have done, what other teams in the division have done. So far, almost every single trade's gone the other way. It's gone to the East, which is nice. Hopefully that continues to happen. But we will be doing something. McCrimmon will talk at some point. I don't know when or where that's going to be, but it will be Friday at some point. So we will get some sort of information about that. That should clear up the Carlson situation a little more. That should clear up the Theodore situation a little bit more, and then we'll have more information about what exactly they've done. We will move past that and we'll get to the game. So that's what I've got on that. Yeah, thanks again to the Jimmerson Law Firm for sponsoring all the Periscopes this season. That's it. Good night.